The unsolvable equation. The emerald towers of Thulia Prime stretched toward twin suns, their perfect spirals representing the mathematical precision that had defined their civilization for 50,000 years. Inside the tallest spire, grand, theoretician Zach Vorn stood before the equation chamber, surrounded by 30 of his species' most brilliant minds. Another cycle, another failure, he said, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of deep frustration among the Thulians. 6,000 years we have pursued the cosmic harmony equation, and still perfection eludes us. The chamber's walls displayed the equation in its entirety, a sprawling, magnificent construction of symbols, variables, and constants that seemed to possess a life of its own. It shifted and pulsed as the Thulian mathematicians fed new parameters into it, testing and retesting avenues they had explored countless times before. Perhaps we require another millennium of contemplation, offered sub-theoretician Kelnara, her silver skin reflecting the equation's glow. Our ancestors did not solve it, nor did their ancestors. Perhaps it is not meant for our generation. Zach Vorn's secondary appendages twitched, a gesture indicating disagreement. The harmony equation is the key to instantaneous stellar travel. It would transform our civilization from a 3-system species to masters of the galactic core. We cannot abandon the pursuit. The chamber's doors parted with a low hum, and junior diplomat Tinfex entered. The young Thulian's nervous energy disrupted the chamber's solemn atmosphere. Grand theoretician, forgive the intrusion, Tinfex said, performing the formal greeting gesture with all 4 arms. The human delegation has arrived. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Humans were newcomers to interstellar society. Barely 3 centuries into faster-than-light travel, using crude mechanical methods the Thulians had abandoned millennia ago. Ah yes, Zach Vorn said, his tone suggesting he had forgotten this minor diplomatic obligation. The trade agreement. Show them to the reception hall. I will join shortly. There is something else, Tinfex continued, hesitation evident in his voice. Their delegation includes a mathematician. She has requested permission to view our mathematical archives. The chamber fell silent. The idea that a human mathematician would have any interest in, let alone comprehension of, Thulian mathematics was almost comical. Grant the request, Zach Vorn said after a moment. It will serve as a cultural exchange. Perhaps they will better appreciate the vastness of what they do not understand. 3 hours later, Dr. Elena Reyes stood in the Thulian archives, surrounded by crystalline data storage units containing millions of years of mathematical development. At 43, she had built her reputation at Earth's Advanced Mathematics Institute by solving problems others considered impossible, often through methods her peers found unorthodox, even messy. These are incredible, she said to her guide, Tinfex, running her hand near a crystal without touching it. Each contains complete mathematical treatises? Yes, Dr. Reyes, the young Thulian replied. Though I must warn you, even our youngest students require decades to master the fundamental principles. Perhaps you would prefer to see our art installations. They are quite accessible to visitors. Elena smiled, recognizing the polite dismissal. I appreciate your concern, but I'd like to stay. Is this section organized chronologically or by subject? Tinfex's multiple eyes blinked in surprise. By subject, then chronologically within each discipline. The cosmic harmonic studies are in the far corner, our most advanced ongoing research. Elena's interest was immediately piqued. Ongoing research? May I see? I suppose there is no harm, Tinfex said, guiding her to a secluded alcove where a holographic projection displayed the same equation that dominated the equation chamber above. Elena stopped, transfixed. This is beautiful, she whispered. The mathematics before her were unlike anything she had encountered, yet somehow familiar in their underlying structure. This is the cosmic harmony equation, Tinfex explained with evident pride. Our civilization's greatest mathematical challenge. It has remained unsolved for 6,000 years. What's its purpose? Elena asked, already mentally dissecting. sections of the equation. In theory, it would enable instantaneous travel between any 2 points in spacetime, Tinfex said. But the energy requirements are incalculable, and several sections remain mathematically inconsistent. Elena nodded, her eyes never leaving the equation. May I access the historical attempts at solutions? I'd like to understand the approaches that have been tried. Tinfex hesitated. I would need authorization from the grand theoretician for that level of access. Then let's ask him, Elena said simply. The meeting with grand theoretician Zaxvorn did not go as Elena had hoped. The Thulian mathematician regarded her with the tolerant amusement one might show a child showing interest in quantum physics. Dr. Reyes, while your curiosity is commendable, the cosmic harmony equation represents the pinnacle of Thulian mathematical thought, he explained, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into English. Your species has only recently discovered transcendental number theory, a field we mastered before we left our oceans. Elena maintained her composure. With respect, grand theoretician, different perspectives sometimes yield unexpected insights. On Earth, some of our greatest breakthroughs came from outsiders. This is not Earth mathematics, Dr. Reyes, Zaxvorn replied, his tone gentle but firm. Our approach is built on perfect precision, each generation adding infinitesimal refinements to work that began before your species walked upright. The equation requires thousands of years of foundational knowledge. Ambassador Chen, the head of the human delegation, placed a warning hand on Elena's arm. This mission was about establishing trade relations, not challenging the mathematical supremacy of their hosts. Perhaps another time, Elena conceded. But as she left the chamber, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen something in the equation. A pattern, hidden beneath the elegant Thulian notation. Something they had missed. That night, unable to sleep in her quarters in the diplomatic compound, Elena pulled out her tablet and began sketching from memory. The cosmic harmony equation was vast, but certain elements had burned themselves into her mind, particularly the sections Tinfex had identified as problematic. Elena had built her career on seeing connections others missed. Where traditional mathematicians approached problems methodically, she often described her process as feeling the shape of the mathematics. Her colleagues called it intuition, her critics called it luck. Elena called it listening to what the numbers were trying to tell her. By morning, she had filled dozens of digital pages with notes and partial reconstructions of the equation. Bleary-eyed but exhilarated, she sought out Tinfex at breakfast. Need to see the equation again, she said without preamble. The young diplomat seemed torn between protocol and curiosity. Dr. Reyes, the grand theoretician, was quite clear. Just for observation, Elena pressed. No access to the historical records. I just want to confirm something. After a moment's hesitation, Tinfex nodded. I can arrange a viewing period, but I must accompany you. Back in the archives, Elena stood before the holographic equation, comparing it to her night's work. Yes, there it was, the pattern she had glimpsed. The Thulians had approached the problem with impeccable logic, each step building meticulously on the last. But what if their initial framework was fundamentally misaligned? Tinfex, she said quietly. The inconsistencies in the energy calculation sections. Have your mathematicians considered that they might not be errors but indicators of a different underlying structure? The Thulian's head tilted. A gesture Elena had learned indicated confusion. I don't understand. This section here, Elena pointed to a particularly dense cluster of symbols. It's trying to reconcile quantum fluctuations with macro-spatial coordinates, right? Yes, that's one of the most challenging aspects, Tinfex confirmed. The reconciliation requires energy levels that approach infinity as distance increases. But what if the relationship isn't linear? Elena said. Excitement building in her voice. What if the spatial dimensions fold when subjected to specific quantum pressures? Like this? She sketched rapidly on her tablet, producing a three-dimensional representation of her theory. Tinfex stared at her drawing. That would violate the principle of cosmic consistency. It's mathematically impossible. Impossible in your mathematical framework, Elena countered. But Earth mathematicians have been exploring dimensional folding for over a century. We call it the Klein-Reyes postulate. The Thulian's expression was unreadable, but his next word surprised her. I will arrange a meeting with the grand theoretician. If nothing else, this represents an interesting cultural exchange in mathematical philosophy. Later that day, Elena found herself once again in the presence of Zach Vorn, but this time in the equation chamber itself, surrounded by the full mathematical council. Her tablet was connected to the chamber's projection system, displaying her rough work from the previous night. Dr. Reyes suggests an alternative approach to the cosmic harmony equation, Tinfex explained, his voice carefully neutral. One based on dimensional folding rather than energy-distance linearity. Fascinating, Zach Vorn said, studying her notes. Completely incorrect, of course, but fascinating nonetheless. Your species' mathematical intuition is remarkably creative. Elena felt a flash of frustration. Grand theoretician, with respect, intuition has its place in mathematics. Sometimes we need to step back from the details to see the larger pattern. Mathematics is not about patterns, Dr. Reyes. It is about precision, Zach Vorn replied. Each symbol in this equation represents a truth refined over centuries. There are no shortcuts. I'm not suggesting a shortcut, Elena said, struggling to find the right words. I'm suggesting that after 6,000 years of refinement, you may be perfecting the wrong approach. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the assembled Thulians. Zach Vorn's expression remained unchanged, but his tone cooled. We have entertained your perspective as a courtesy, Dr. Reyes. But this equation has occupied our greatest minds for millennia. The solution will come through careful iteration, not human hunches. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, clearly trying to salvage the diplomatic situation. We appreciate your willingness to share your work with Dr. Reyes. Perhaps we could return to the trade discussions? But Elena wasn't ready to give up. Grand theoretician, would you permit me one night? With full access to the equation? If I find nothing of value, I'll withdraw my objections completely. For a long moment, Zach Vorn was silent. Finally, he said, One night, Tinfex will provide you with viewing access, but nothing may be altered in the official record. That night, Elena worked feverishly in a private chamber, the full cosmic harmony equation projected before her. Hours passed as she dove deeper into its structure, testing her theory against the vast mathematical framework the Thulians had built. The more she explored, the more convinced she became. The Thulians had created a masterpiece of mathematical precision, but they had built it on a flawed foundation. Their understanding of space-time was too rigid, too linear. They couldn't see the solution because they were looking at it from the wrong angle. As dawn approached, Elena sat back, exhausted but certain. She had found it, the key that had eluded the Thulians for millennia. Now she just had to prove it. To them, human intuition morning found Elena standing once again before the mathematical council. But this time she was prepared. She had spent the final hours of her night not just refining her solution, but thinking about how to present it to the Thulians in a way they might actually consider. Thank you for this opportunity, she began, aware that Ambassador Chen was watching nervously from the side of the chamber. I believe I've identified why the cosmic harmony equation has resisted solution for so long. Zach Vorn and the other council members regarded her with polite skepticism. Please proceed, Dr. Reyes, the grand theoretician said. Elena had decided on a direct approach. The fundamental assumption underlying your equation is that space-time is a continuous medium through which objects must travel, requiring energy proportional to distance and mass. But what if space-time itself isn't what you think it is? Bier activated her presentation, and the chamber filled with a new visualization. The Thulian equation transformed through her perspective. In Earth mathematics, we've discovered that space-time can be understood as a fabric with inherent points of connectivity, places where seemingly distant locations are actually adjacent when viewed from higher dimensions. Kel Nara, the sub-theoretician, spoke up. This contradicts the principle of cosmic consistency. Distance cannot simply be ignored. Not ignored, Elena corrected. Reinterpreted. Your own equation has been telling you this for millennia. She highlighted a section of the original equation. These recurring inconsistencies in the energy calculations aren't errors. They're signposts. They occur precisely at the points where the fabric of spacetime naturally folds. She manipulated the display, transforming the equation section into a three-dimensional model. If we stop trying to force spacetime to behave linearly and instead map these natural folding points, the energy requirements drop exponentially. The chamber was silent as the Thulian studied her presentation. After a long moment, Zaxvorn spoke. Your approach is unorthodox. It disregards 6,000 years of established Thulian mathematical principles. It builds upon them, Elena countered. Every attempt your mathematicians made has brought you closer to this realization. You've been accumulating the data needed to see this pattern for millennia. An elderly Thulian mathematician whom Elena hadn't met before moved forward, examining her calculations with all 6 eyes focused intently. This section here, he said, pointing to a particularly complex transformation. How did you derive this relationship? Elena explained her reasoning, how she had recognized patterns similar to Earth's Klein-Reyes postulate in the Thulian equation and followed those connections to their logical conclusion. Interesting, the elderly Thulian said. Not rigorous by our standards, but interesting. Theory is valuable, Zaxvorn said dismissively, but the cosmic harmony equation must produce practical results. Your approach may appear elegant, Dr. Reyes, but can it be implemented? This was the moment Elena had prepared for. I believe it can, she said confidently, and I can demonstrate it. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Demonstrate? Zaxvorn repeated. How? With your permission, I'd like to use your quantum simulation laboratory, Elena said. My solution predicts that specific energy configurations will create detectable spacetime folding even at a small scale. After a brief discussion among the council members, permission was granted. The entire assembly moved to the simulation laboratory, a vast chamber filled with equipment Elena could only partially comprehend. Thulian technicians worked under her direction, setting up the parameters she specified based on her modified equation. The traditional approach to the cosmic harmony equation attempts to brute force travel through spacetime, Elena explained as they worked. But my solution identifies natural connection points, places where the fabric already wants to fold. The equipment hummed to life, quantum fields interacting precisely as she had programmed. On the main display, a simulation of spacetime appeared, represented as a complex grid. If I'm wrong, nothing will happen, Elena said. If I'm right, she activated the final sequence. For a moment, nothing changed. Then suddenly, the grid warped. 2 distant points moved toward each other, not through the intervening space, but as if the grid itself had folded, bringing them into direct contact. Gasps. And the Thulian equivalent of murmurs filled the chamber. The simulation was working exactly as Elena had predicted, demonstrating in minutes what the Thulians had sought for millennia. This is merely a simulation, Zaxvorn pointed out, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Then let's try it with actual particles, Elena suggested. Under the watchful eyes of the Mathematical Council, the experiment was reconfigured to transport quantum particles across the laboratory. Again, Elena's predictions proved accurate. The particles didn't travel through the intervening space. They simply disappeared from one location and appeared at another, the fabric of spacetime momentarily connecting distant points. Remarkable, the elderly Thulian mathematician said. In all my 500 years, I never considered such an approach. Zaxvorn studied the results, his 6 eyes blinking in the pattern that Elena now recognized as deep thought, rather than frustration. Dr. Reyes, he said finally, it appears we may have been rigid in our thinking. It was as close to an admission of error as a grand theoretician had likely ever made. Elena smiled. Different perspectives have different strengths, grand theoretician. Your civilization built the mathematical framework necessary to understand this phenomenon. My perspective simply offered a new way to look at it. In the days that followed, Elena worked closely with the Thulian mathematicians, refining her solution and integrating it fully into their equation. The cultural barriers began to break down as they worked together, the Thulians bringing their unparalleled precision and rigor, Elena contributing human intuition and creativity. Your species thinks differently, Kelnara told her as they collaborated on implementing the solution at larger scales. Where we see mathematical relationships as absolute and fixed, you see them as fluid, almost alive. Mathematics is a language, Elena replied. The same truth can be expressed in different ways. Sometimes you need to listen to what the numbers are trying to tell you, not just what you want them to say. 1 month later, Elena stood with Ambassador Chen and the human delegation as the Thulians prepared to test the first practical application of the solved cosmic harmony equation. A small probe had been equipped with a drive system based on Elena's space-time folding principle. If this works, Tianfex said, standing beside her, it will transform our understanding of the universe. And bring our civilizations closer together, Elena added. The probe activated. For a heartbeat, it shimmered with strange light, then vanished. Seconds later, confirmation came through. The probe had successfully transmitted data from the orbit of the system's outermost planet, over 4 billion kilometers away. A journey that would have taken conventional ships weeks had been completed in an instant. The implications were staggering. With this technology, the vast gulfs between stars would no longer isolate civilizations. The galaxy would become accessible in ways previously unimaginable. In the celebration that followed, grand theoretician Sax Vorn approached Elena. Dr. Reyes, your contribution to Thulian mathematics will be recorded in our archives for all time. I'm honored, Elena said sincerely, but this is just the beginning of what our species can accomplish together. Indeed, Sax Vorn agreed. For 6,000 years we refined our approach without questioning its foundations. You showed us that sometimes one must step back to see the complete picture. As the twin suns of Thulia set behind the Emerald Towers, Elena gazed up at the stars now suddenly within reach. Human intuition and Thulian precision had accomplished together what neither could have done alone, a testament to the power of different perspectives. In the great mathematical archives of Thulia, a new crystal now stood beside the ancient ones. It contained not just the solution to the cosmic harmony equation, but a lesson that would endure for millennia to come. That true wisdom lies not in perfecting what we already know, but in remaining open to what we have yet to imagine. The stars, once impossibly distant, now waited to welcome them all.